All right, I think everybody who's here is going to be is here now. There might be one or two or four more folks slip in the door. Tonight is called "The Shape of Love in Real Life." The sermon series for Lent is titled "The Shape of Love." And the more I played with the idea of what to do on this night, thought it'll be kind of fun to maybe take on a little more practical application of what that means. I can fill up 20 minutes on a Sunday morning pretty easily, but it doesn't necessarily exactly translate into practical advice for everyday living. Although if you need some advice and want it from me, I'm happy to give you advice about a variety of things. Trust me on that. So let's go to the next slide. It's inspired by this book by Brian Zahn, both the sermon series and tonight, The Wood Between the Worlds, A Poetic Theology of the Cross. I found myself, as I was reading this book back in January, not for using as a sermon series idea, just as part of my regular study and reading. And I really approached it as a devotional read. I found myself getting weepy as I was reading all these different ideas of his, these poetic thoughts of his about the cross. And then I just thought, wow, this would make a good sermon series topic for Lent, to really focus on the cross for those 5 Sundays. Mary Kate, by the way, has this sermon. I think it's the 5th Sunday of Lent, right before Palm Sunday. So put that in the back of your mind too. You'll get a great angle of her vision on how this all works for us. By the way, I mentioned in my all church email last Friday, I know you read them every week, and I know you read them all the way to the end, but just in case you forgot to read all the way to the end, very close to the end, I mentioned that I would love to have a book club with anybody who's interested in reading this book with me. I've already read it, of course, but I would love to have if just one person said yes. I would love it if we could get 2 or 3 more to say yes, and then that's a group of 4 or 5, and that's more than enough to. There's Jennifer. That's 2. We have 2. There's 3. Thank you. Okay, good. We got 4. And Karen, you're still in, right? Yeah. Oh, there's 5. Jay's 2. Okay, good. We got 5. Thank you. Well, I'll get back to you on the time, and we'll get together and chat about a little bit about Brian Zahn's work. By the way, you have to buy the book and read it, just so we're clear about that. All right. So there's a chapter in this book. It's chapter 15, and it's titled "The Sword-Pierced Soul of Mary," Mary, the mother of Jesus. And it wasn't one of the chapters that was inspiring any of the sermons, and I thought, oh, this makes a lot of sense for tonight. And it also helps us get into some real-world issues that we face, just like Mary, the mother of Jesus, did. Now, I'm pretty sure none of us had an angel come and talk to us about the baby we were going to be bringing to the world. If you did, talk to Mary Kate. She's the pastoral care person. Thank you, Kay. Kay understood the joke there. But it's a beautiful chapter on what it must have, how difficult it must have been to be Mary. I mean, she's blessed of all women according to Luke chapter 1, and yet at the same time we'll hear a quote from a man named Simeon who uses that phrase: "A sword will pierce your soul." So let's remind ourselves of who she is. This is from Brian Zahn. Mary is a holy mystery that we should thoroughly explore theologically and devotionally, Protestant hesitancies notwithstanding. If you don't feel comfortable raising your hand, don't. But if you're anybody with a Roman Catholic background, we have a few. In the church I grew up in, the church is not all of them, but a few of them were very anti-Roman Catholic. I think I've told you about Mrs. Schwartz in 5th grade when I brought my 2 friends to Sunday school for Bring Your Friend Sunday School Sunday. And if you brought the most friends, your class got donuts the next week. Well, I brought 2 friends, and our whole class did a really good job. We doubled our attendance, and so we got the free donuts the next week. And Mrs. Schwartz said to me, "It's too bad about your friends because they're going to go to hell." And I said, "How do you know?" And she said, "Because they're Catholics. They worship idols like Mary." Even my 5th grade self went, "That's nuts." Because these 2, they actually prayed over their lunch every day in the cafeteria. I knew they went to catechism on Wednesday nights. I knew they went to Mass on Saturdays or Sundays, sometimes both Saturdays and Sundays. As far as I could tell, they were super faithful people, and the idea that they were going to hell was silly. But there are some things about Roman Catholicism that we Protestants are a little bit hesitant about. I think the whole celibacy thing is open for a big discussion for priests. The failure to ordain women as priests is something I think they ought to examine. I have a good friend. We've lost contact, but when I was in San Diego, we were good friends. Who's a Roman Catholic priest, and we worked on some projects for feeding the hungry. It was great stuff. And one day, his name was Tom. I just said, Father Tom, how long is it going to be before y'all ordain women as priests? And he said, oh, it's coming, not long. Well, really, seriously, like how soon? Oh, within 150 years. The Roman Catholic Church thinks in terms of thousands of years, so, I could understand why he said that. Then there's some other stuff that we could talk about. I won't get into all that. I think we sort of miss something by we don't necessarily want to have a statue to Mary. On the other hand, maybe we ought to spend a little more time paying attention to who she is and how she was. And we're going to get into more of that on this night. In fact, speaking of that, let's go to the next slide. Have you heard this phrase before? Mary is the Theotokos. That's literally Greek for the God bearer or the mother of God, the Theotokos. Here's a line from an ancient Byzantine hymn from about, I think it's from the 6th century. Listen to these words. It's about Mary. You were made more spacious than the heavens, O most pure mother, for God cannot be contained by the whole universe, and yet he chose to be contained in your womb for the sake of our salvation. And we can argue with the theology of that. I would be inclined to. But it's really not a good idea to argue too much with poetry, because this is a line from a hymn. Hear it again. Allow the poetry to speak to us here. You were made more spacious than the heavens, O most pure mother, for God cannot be contained by the whole universe, and yet God chose to be contained in your womb for the sake of our salvation. Has anyone ever been to a Greek or Russian Orthodox church? Have you been in one in Greece by chance? It's an amazing experience to be there and to see the way Mary is honored in a variety of different ways, not just in the Roman Catholic Church, but also among our Greek and Russian Orthodox friends. Julie and I once had a chance to, we took a cruise with about 40 people from the church we were serving at the time around. It was called In the Footsteps of Paul. We spent time in Greece, and then we rode a ship for 4 days and went to various different islands, including the island of Crete, which I don't think Paul ever went there. At least, I shouldn't say it out loud. I don't think so. Anyway, it was a stop. It was a beautiful little town. It was a Sunday morning. We'd had worship with our folks on the boat, which was another cool story for another time. And then we had about 4 or 5 hours in Heraclion. Am I saying that right? We're sitting having a cup of coffee, and we're watching people come out of this Greek Orthodox church straight up at noon. The bells are ringing, and they're coming out. We noticed they're all carrying a big chunk of bread. And so we said to our server, I noticed they're carrying bread as they come out. What is that? And she looked at me like I was crazy and said, it's the body of Christ. And what the priest says in this particular church is you take the body of Christ with you so that you can be energized and be given life by that bread, the body of Christ. Anyway, some cool things like that in the Greek Orthodox Church. All right, next slide. Here's the inspiration for tonight. Then Simeon. This is Jesus being dedicated at the temple by Joseph and Mary. Simeon is there, a man who had longed to see the Messiah. Then Simeon blessed them and said to his mother Mary, this child is destined for the falling and rising of many in Israel, and to be a sign that will be opposed so that the inner thoughts of many will be revealed, and a sword will pierce your own soul too. And Jesus maybe is a couple of years old at this point, maybe younger, we don't know for sure. Can you imagine if Luke is reporting an actual story that happened, not just something that maybe he added to the story to give it some flavor? Maybe he's telling something. It feels real to me. A sword will pierce your own soul too. When we baptize children, In the church I served in Kansas City, we did infant baptisms, but primarily people there like to have their babies dedicated. We did infant baptisms in the chapel. It's a longer story to explain all that, but both what I used to say was the dedications are just like the baptisms without any water. It's a true story. Anyway, those two events in the life of the child and the family are sort of modeled more or less off the way Jesus was dedicated. We don't say to the mom, your soul's going to be pierced by this child. But we kind of hint at it, don't we? I mean, we say to those who are there when we baptize children, we say to the godparents, to the grandparents, and to the congregation, there's going to be times when this is really tough on mom and dad. Are you willing to support them and love them when those times happen? We don't dwell on that. We don't get into specifics, but it's true. Julie and I were driving up tonight. We're coming down up Dublin Road on this way to north. When we drove past a cute little scene, there was a dad pushing a stroller with a little baby in the stroller, and behind dad was a 3-year-old little boy, I assume his son, who was pushing a plastic lawnmower. And he's like, Dad's pushing the baby, I'm pushing the lawnmower. And Julie said, do you miss those moments? And I said, those moments, yes. The full day of all that stuff, not so much. not so much. But this text is powerful in many ways because it's as though Simeon is prophesying. This is going to be difficult for you. This is going to be if this is the one I believe he is, this will be difficult for you. And so what Zond wants us to understand is in many ways, what's true for Mary is true for all of us. Next slide. No one makes it through life unscathed. Behind every beautiful thing, there is some kind of pain. The sword of sorrow eventually pierces every heart. In 2002, I announced to our kids who were in the 7th grade and the 2nd grade. Nate was in 7th, Stephen was in 2nd. Julie and I had been out to Kansas City where I interviewed for the job at that church there. I was going to announce to them that we were moving. We had pictures of our big, beautiful new house with the finished basement. It was a really nice, big backyard. It was a brand new house. We were the first owners of it. Everything was sparkling and fresh and beautiful, and we thought they would be excited. I explained what was happening. Maybe it took 3 minutes to say, we're moving. Here's why. Here's where we're going. Here's pictures of our house. Stephen, our 2nd grader, I'm not making this up. He fell on the floor and began to sob. I mean, those guttural, just awful, horrible, I can't go, I can't. I'm looking at Julie going, do something. She's the court-appointed special advocate, and she's probably going to have me arrested, is probably what she can do. And Nate, so Stephen was a pool of tears, literally, I can't even imitate it. It was just so awful and so terrible. I felt horrible. And then Nate, our 7th grader, how did he react? Can you guess? I'm not moving. You can go to hell because I'm not moving. I said, well, I kind of think I'm already in hell at this moment. They're so, really, we moved to Atlanta when Nate was 4. Atlanta was all they knew. And Stephen was born in Atlanta. Their best friends lived literally right next door. Timmy was in 7th grade and knew Nate from kindergarten forward. What's the other kid's name? Nicholas. Nicholas was Stephen's best little buddy. They'd been best friends for literally Stephen's entire life that he could remember. Their souls were definitely pierced. Next slide. Here's another one. My grandfather died in 1998, I think it was. I've told you a little bit about that story. I flew out to California to lead the service. My sister Jerry spent a lot of time helping me put it together. My mom as well, of course. We met in a small funeral home chapel. There's about 50 people there. Grandpa had lived a long, great life. He was 83. had smoked up until he was 50 years old. Started smoking when he was a little kid. At age 50, when I was like 2 or 3, I said, Grandpa, why do you put that filthy thing in your mouth? And right then he stopped smoking, and it probably gave him another 15 or 20 years because some smart little future preacher was being a jerk to him. But it actually worked out long run. Anyway, we loved Grandpa deeply. My grandfather and my grandmother were married 63 years. I did the renewal of their vows at their 60th wedding anniversary, one of the sweetest things I've ever been involved in my life. Service went very well. My mother's minister was there. He helped me lead the service. Afterwards, Grandma invited about 10 people over, her 4 grandkids and a couple friends from church. She had a nice meal catered for all of us. We were eating the pie or whatever, probably an hour or so after we had gathered there for the meal. And I went over to Grandma. She's by herself over in the corner in her little condo. I put my arm around her and I said, Grandma, 63 wonderful years. You've got so many amazing memories. I tell you, she turned and looked at me, and there was a hard look in her eyes. Almost like I was in trouble. And she said, it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough. So even after 63 amazing years, she already desperately missed her Robbie, as she called him. So what about you all? At your tables, Karen, you guys might want to join over here, maybe or just the two of you can talk to, whatever you want to do. At your tables, next slide. When have you experienced, and this might be making you feel a little vulnerable, maybe it doesn't have to be the worst thing that ever happened in your life, but if you're willing to do that, it might help somebody at your table. When have you experienced a moment that felt like a sword piercing your soul? At your tables right now, please. Okay. John has the microphone. If there's anyone who's willing to share, and I recognize these can be fairly private things. If you don't want to share it, please do not. And of course, don't share somebody else's story at your table. But if you'd like to share, just raise your hand, and John will come to you with the microphone. If you're willing to share. Here we go, right here.
I meant to tell you, John, you look like St. Patrick's Day in the works. So I know you're just preparing for that day.
Green beer's coming next week.
See? I think one of my sword piercings in my soul, I'd worked for a company for almost 22 years, and then I got the 8 a.m. phone call on my calendar and with HR, and they're like, and your job is eliminated. And that I spent a lot of time at that company, like 80 hours a week. Like, it was really hard to hear that. Still hurts today. But the silver lining was I got the whole summer off, and I spent it with my then 4-year-old, and that was pretty amazing.
Okay. Thank you, Sarah. Somebody else.
Mine is a long story, but I'll keep it real short. So I'm adopted, and I had reached out when I found my birth mother. I reached out by letter once, and then the second time I finally met her, and on a Friday, and talked to her for 45 minutes. She didn't know who I was, and then 9/11 happened, and so I thought I need to fess up here, because who knew what was going to go. And so I wrote her and told her that it was me, and that I would love to meet her just for coffee, and that's really all I wanted. But, I had spent 45 minutes, and we had a lovely conversation, which is a blessing, but she never responded. So it's kind of like the first rejection, the second rejection, and the third rejection. It's hard. It's hard.
Thank you, Kay. Back there, Susan.
Well, I shared about my marriage, my first marriage of 25 years to a man who was wonderful and kind and a wonderful father. But over the previous 2 or 3 years, I realized I was really unhappy in my marriage because I wasn't who I was supposed to be. And so we ended that marriage. But I remember early on, my kids were really angry at me and saying not kind things. And my husband said to them, "Don't you ever yell at your mother in this house again." And so he's still a very wonderful friend to me, still a good father, all that. But on March the 10th, I'll celebrate 25 years with Nancy.
Thank you for sharing, Susan. Anybody else? Okay, John, if you'll just hang on to that microphone, we're going to do this again in a few minutes. Let's go to the next slide here. In the flush of love's light, we dare be brave, and suddenly we see that love costs all we are. Susan, you were kind of speaking to that just now. And will ever be. Yet it is only love which sets us free. There's two things that this quote from Maya that jumps out, at least to me. The first one is, in the flush of love's light, we dare be brave. There's just something about when you're in a relationship with someone who loves you and you love them and you know you love each other, you can take on anything. Julie said to me the other day, do you remember when we got in our car, our little red Toyota Tercel that wasn't paid for yet, and our little dog, Sally, who was the sweetest Cocker Spaniel in the history of Cocker Spaniels, of dogs, period, let's just be honest. We had no money, nothing, but we drove all the way across country to Upper East Tennessee to go to seminary, found jobs, found a place to live, all that. Had wide open questions, and we were just, can I say, stupidly in love? There was some courage there, but notice how she progresses from that to suddenly we see that love costs all we are and will ever be. Yet it is only love which sets us free. I think she's describing in some ways Mary's journey as well. She learns from the angel she's the chosen one to be the Theotokos. She's courageous enough to say yes. Suddenly she sees that love's going to cost everything, and yet it's love that finally does set her free. Next slide. This is a tradition I didn't know about until I read Zahn's book, and he's the one who names this. Apparently there's a within Roman Catholic tradition, especially in the country of Spain, there's an understanding of the 7 sorrows of Mary. And you'll often see, or he said anyway, says you'll find these in Roman Catholic churches, especially spread throughout Spain, where it won't be like a plaster statue or a stone carving or something. It'll be a mannequin dressed in period clothes, Mary's period clothes from 2,000 years ago, with real hair and all, and there'll be 7 swords piercing her body, and it's in relation to what are called the 7 sorrows of Mary. We heard the first one, Simeon's prophecy, the flight to Egypt. You remember the story, right? Herod has heard there's a new king. He's going to come to Bethlehem, wipe out all the babies under 2, all the male babies under 2. She and her husband become immigrants. Thank you, refugee immigrants who travel to Egypt. Third one is the loss of the child Jesus in Jerusalem. Jesus was like 12 years old, and he's in the temple teaching the wise theologians there, and it's like a day before they know that Jesus isn't with them. That sounds a little bit strange, but when my sister Carolyn was like 4 years old, we were at church where my dad was the preacher. We'd been there for Sunday school. My dad had preached. All the kids were in children's church, and then we got in the car, and my mom was in the passenger seat, my dad was driving, and my sister Jerry was next to me, and none of us thought about Carolyn. We got all the way home, and my mom went, "Where's Carolyn?" And we drove back to church and got her. So I know families can sometimes do silly things like this. This next one is according to a medieval legend that Mary met Jesus on the Via Dolorosa. That's the traditional route that he took through Jerusalem on his way to the cross, carrying his own cross. Anybody been to the Via Dolorosa? Some of you who went with us to Israel, to Holy Land a few years ago may remember that. When we were there, I was really upset. The first time I went, not with First Community, but with the other church I served. There'd been a Palestinian-Israeli clash of some kind. And at every one of the stations of the cross along the Via Dolorosa, there were 2 or 3 Israeli soldiers with long guns, those big AR-15 things. And I was just kind of furious. This is ruining this. This should be a spiritual moment for, not just for me, but for the group I'm leading here. We had 40 or 45 people with us. This is just terrible. And then maybe it was the Spirit, but something had popped in my brain and said, on the first time this happened, he was being dragged and forced by armed soldiers. Every step along the way, there would have been a band of soldiers taking him on his way to be killed. So looking at it that way, it became more powerful, frankly, in the moment. Then, of course, the crucifixion, and think about the courage of Mary. And the gospel records that Mary's at the cross. When someone was crucified in antiquity, you've seen pictures of Jesus on the cross, right? I've never seen one that's correct because they were crucified naked. Maybe it's our Western sensibilities or whatever, but if we wanted to get the true sense of what this looks like, he was most likely, 99% of the time, people were crucified naked. He's tortured. He's been beaten. His body is no doubt covered in blood. He's dying in agony, and yet his mother is there. What did Angelo say about bravery, courage? The more I got into this chapter, the more I realized how courageous Mary is. She's there when he's taken down from the cross, and then when he's buried in the tomb of Joseph of Arimathea. We're getting pretty deep and serious and heavy here. You know this story, don't you? About Joseph of Arimathea's wife saying, why did you give the tomb to Jesus? I don't understand what you're doing. Why did you let Jesus have your tomb? I mean, it's our family tomb. And Joseph said to his wife, oh, it's okay. He only needs it for 3 days. Yeah, it's really bad. That's a really, really bad joke. Getting back to the serious. So I made a list. And we're not going to do this tonight for everybody. But I would encourage you, later tonight or sometime this week, sometime during Lent, between now and Easter Sunday, that you make your own 7 sorrows list. While I was working on this early this morning, I just jotted down. These may not be the most, but these are the ones that came to my mind initially. I made a list of my own 7 sorrows. The first time I ever remember feeling just unbelievably sad, overwhelmingly sad, was when I was in kindergarten. And our teacher, who I had a huge crush on, she was, other than my mom, the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen in my life. And I just wanted to do well for her, and I liked her and loved her and thought she was amazing. And then one school day morning, the principal came in and told us that she was going to have a baby and she wouldn't be back until next year. I got up, left, and walked home. And my mom said, what are you doing here? And I remember her saying to her, my teacher's not coming back. I'm not going back to school either. But honestly, I can still remember. So how old are you in kindergarten, 4 or 5? I think I started a year early. I think I was 4. I remember just feeling like, this is terrible. And I didn't like that feeling. I'll never forget, moms and dads who are in the room, or anybody who works with young people, a young child who's hurting and sad and overwhelmed, the worst thing they need to hear you say is, oh, it's fine. You'll be fine. Get over it. They hurt as badly as we do. And never forget that. The second one for me, and this might seem silly, but it was a big deal for me. When I was in the 5th grade, it was the first time I ever tried out for a basketball team. Now, we didn't have rec league basketball back then. If you played on the school team. And there were going to be 24 guys that would make the A team or the B team. And we had a week of practices, and then the coach put up on the wall, A team, 1 through 12, B team, 1 through 12. Guess which list I was on? I was on the B team. I cried all the way home. My dad, this is kind of, Sarah, you shared how your story turned into some wonderful time with your 4-year-old, and that turned out to be a blessing. My dad called a guy who was a member of the church who played for a small liberal arts college not far from our church, who was a member of our church. He was like 19, 20 years old. His name was Phil Jones. He said, hey, would you take Glenn and work with him after practice the next couple of weeks? He's really upset. And Coach, well, he actually became my high school basketball coach. That's a longer story. But Phil, who I thought was the coolest guy ever, worked real hard on me. I eventually made it back to the A team. But I still remember seeing my name on that B team list and just thinking, this is horrible. And when I was number 3rd, we moved from our neighborhood in Southern California out to Victorville. Anybody ever heard of Victorville? It's on the way to Vegas. It's a little stop of almost nothing. I remember just being so overwhelmed. I had some friends finally. We lived in a neighborhood long enough to where I had friends, and I went to their house, and they came to my house, and it was just a painful thing. My freshman year, my first semester of college is when my mom and dad announced that they were separated. First time. They didn't get divorced for another 12 years, but I just remember being overwhelmed and crushed in school. I did terribly. I dropped out in the middle of the semester, went back home to help my mom and dad, which is all you need to know about me, by the way. Older brother syndrome is something I suffered from as a kid. When Julie and I hit a wall named divorce, this is the 5th one. A lot of the issues were mine. The doctor, the therapist we went to see, Julie and I filled out a clipboard, and we were both very honest. And he looked at Julie and said, we have some work to do. And then he looked at me and said, we're going to start with you. Again, unbelievably painful, but the kind of work we needed to do. This one I sort of shared, but it was a helpful moment to recognize as a pastor how much pain many of us are carrying. We Julie had a little convertible car, a Toyota Solara. Do you remember Toyota Solaras? Sweet little car, beautiful, royal blue colored, the black rag top. The top was down. It's a 75-degree day in East Kansas. We're driving up and down the hills. We had this thing, we don't do as much anymore. We used to when we were younger, where we'd go looking for a mom and pop diner in some little town and ask for apple pie. And just because we wanted to do pie experiments to find out who has the best apple pie. So we're on our way to get some pie, and it's a gorgeous day. I've got my hat on to keep the sun off my head. We're just driving along, and out of the blue, Julie goes, do you think she had red hair? I know immediately who she was talking about. She'd had a miscarriage. She had 3. One of the 3 was fairly late when she miscarried. We'd already decided it was a girl. We already named her. Her name was going to be Sarah. Sarah Marie, I think is what we were going to name her. Out of nowhere, Julie said, and this is 20 years after the miscarriage, do you think she would have had red hair? Well, all of us carry wounds. All of us carry them. And I won't tell you the whole story, but my best friend in Kansas City betrayed our friendship. And that was an unbelievably painful experience. And if I tell you that story, I'll cry. I'm not going to cry on this night. I'm telling you all those things just because I know every one of us has at least 7 that you can name. Go back to your childhood. Go back as far as you want to. Go back 7 weeks. Maybe you've had 7 in the last 7 weeks. I don't know. But I would strongly recommend, this is a real helpful thing for me to do today. Do that between now and Easter, and I think you'll find it a blessing. All right, next quote. Meanwhile, standing near the cross of Jesus were his mother and his mother's sister, Mary, the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. When Jesus saw his mother and the disciple whom he loved standing beside her, probably the disciple John, he said to his mother, "Woman, here is your son." Then he said to the disciple, "Here is your mother." And from that hour, the disciple took her into his own home. We oftentimes think of Jesus in this moment as how courageous he is, loving his mother, caring for his mother in what must be an awfully difficult moment. But again, it's kind of a way of underlining that she is there. She shows this great courage. She's there in the midst of her son's unbelievable pain. And remember this about crucifixion. It's dangerous for her to be there. because they're looking for people who are related to this guy who committed the act of sedition, this guy that the government is putting to death legally. They're looking for other of his friends, his family. We need to keep an eye on her. We need to keep an eye on him and those other guys who are there. This is a very dangerous place for her to be, not just for her soul, but for her own personal safety. And yet she's there. In my mind, it is the most courageous story in the Bible. The mother standing by her child as he's being executed by the state, knowing she could be next. Oh, Julie has a word, yes.
Also, she's facing her pain.
Yeah.
She's not running away from it.
Yes.
She's not hiding from it. She's experiencing it. She's going to allow herself to experience it rather than run away. Because
Yes.
I would be wanting to run away. But she basically said, I'm not going to let him die
Right.
without me being here
Right.
at the foot of the cross.
Which is a hard thing. Some people can't do that, by the way. I mean, let's be clear. Not everyone has the ability to be there in someone else's last moment. That can be a painful thing. But Mary, I think let's go to the next slide. Is this on the next slide? Oh, it's that story. I'll tell that story in a moment. Somewhere in here. Oh, it's the slide after this. Skip ahead to the next slide. I'll come back to Cameron. Mary mourns with us. I really believe I think I'm finally shifting out of the critical mode. You know, John and I were trained in seminary to think critically about the Bible and theology, and it's an important part of it. And sometimes a lot of preachers never get out of that critical mode. I think I'm moving towards a post-critical era in my life. And I have this sense that there are saints in heaven who pray with us, who mourn with us. I don't know how that happens. I don't know. I regularly ask my brother to pray for me because, you know, my brother used to say we would argue by text, watching baseball games or basketball games or whatever about what the coach should do next. And it's always our favorite teams that we're arguing about, so we care about the same stuff. And he'd get mad at me and I'd get mad at him. We'd still keep arguing. Then all of a sudden, there'd be like 5 minutes of no texting, and then he would send a text that said, I'm praying for Julie. I think he's still doing that. I think he's still praying. I think he's still praying for Julie. I believe Mary mourns with us. She carried the child, the holy child Jesus. She carried this one that we look at and we think he's a full reflection of who God is. What an amazing thing. I'm going to tell you one more story. Back up another line, or slide. Sorry. There you go. Thank you. And then we're going to do another roundtable talk here in a moment. There was a family in my church in Kansas City. The mom was on my staff. She was our director of children's ministry. It would have been like Julie Richards, who's on our staff. She was married to Michael. Michael had grown up in the Roman Catholic Church. He wanted lots of babies. They had 5 kids. One of them was Cameron. Cameron was they had 4. Cameron was the 4th kid. Healthy, strong baby. Everything's great. 11 months old. He's got a fever. It's 99, 101. It's 103. They've given him Tylenol. They're putting cold things on it. It's not working. They take him to the ER. They call in specialists. All kinds of things are happening. He's getting sicker and sicker and sicker and sicker. And sometime around 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, he's gone. The autopsy a few weeks later revealed that he'd ingested a piece of plastic into his lungs, and the plastic became infected. And it was the infection that took his life. I'll never forget his funeral service. There were 900 people there. I mean, the sanctuary was just jammed with their friends and family and loved ones. They're well known in the community. In my meditation, I used something I'd seen that Barbara Brown Taylor, a great preacher, had done, and so I adapted it for the memorial service. I said, and this is when the Iraqi war was going on. I said, go to Baghdad, where there's a school that's been bombed out, and right on the bombed out wall, Jesus wept. Go to Florida, where there's been a hurricane that has completely wiped a home away from its neighborhood and destroyed most of the neighborhood. And on the sidewalk out in front of those homes that are no longer there, right on the sidewalk, Jesus wept. Then go with me to a hospital room where Mike and Carla held their little boy for the last time. And right on the wall, Jesus wept. And I really believe that Jesus weeps with us, that in our pain, in our sorrow, in our suffering, that Jesus weeps with us. And always remember, the best thing you can ever do for someone in that moment is to come with few, if any, words. Say, I love you and I care about you. And embrace them. That's what Madeleine L'Engle said. She was asked, Madeleine L'Engle, you know, the famous author? She was asked, when your husband died after they'd been married like 45 years, what helped the most? What helped the most, she said? The people who hugged me and said, I love you, and did nothing more. I told you that story so you know the power of the second part of this. About a year later, Carla was in a group in her neighborhood of moms that did Bible study once a week, like at 10 o'clock in the morning on a Thursday or something. She was the only sort of first community progressive-like Christian. All of her other friends were very conservative, evangelical, but they were her friends, and she was open and welcoming and, you know, kind of like us at First Community. She's more than happy to learn and think about things differently, whatever. And they're having a discussion about miracles. One of her friends should not have talked because she looked at Carla and said, I don't understand why Cameron didn't get a miracle. Don't ever say that to someone who's lost a child, but she said it. If she'd said that to me, if I'd lost one of my kids and she said that to me, I would have said words that you would be surprised your pastor would say, but I would not have hesitated. But my friend Carla, who at that point was still on the staff of the church, she just looked directly at her friend and she said, you don't understand. Cameron was the miracle. I think that story is stuck in my mind. That's an Easter story because it's the promise. I think it's part of the promise that someday that her family will be reunited. They had another baby later, so they have a total of 5 kids. Cameron's already in the resurrection, but someday I believe all of us will be reunited. And my time is getting up. I want to do a couple more things. One more thing around the table. Let's flip real quick to the next slide. Mary Moore's with us. Oh, just a little FYI thing here. Anybody been to Ephesus? How many of you have been to Ephesus? This is the great theater there. I didn't take this photo, but I have one like it. I climbed up to the top of the theater. You can hear people talking down at the floor. It's a cool thing. According to tradition, see on what is like as you're looking at it, the left side of it's up here on the wall too, isn't it? Yeah. Can you see it? There's a little mound, a little hill. To the left of that hill is where tradition says Mary's buried, that she traveled with John, and they relocated to Ephesus, and that's not too far from there is where she was buried. Next one. So the Christian life calls us into a deeper, courageous love. And now one more table talk time. We got plenty of time. Next one. Have you seen courageous love at work in the world, and when? Now it's not about you. Have you seen? I mean, the story that I told you is about my friend Carla is courageous love at work, able to name in a calm, gentle voice. Cameron was the miracle. To me, that's powerful, courageous love. Have you seen courageous love at work in your home, in your neighborhood, in the church, some other church, in the country, in the world somewhere? Go. Okay. Anybody who would like to, remember, you can't share someone else's story, but somebody who has seen some courageous love at work in the world, raise your hand and John will find you. There we go. Mike, please.
When I got married, I found out my father-in-law, we were doing the wedding list, and we couldn't, my father-in-law had a brother. And I loved everything about my father-in-law, just a wonderful man, career military. And I said, I don't see your brother's name on our wedding list. And he said, well, he's not invited. And I said, why? And he said, because he married a black woman. Ooh. And I went, huh? And this was in the 90s. And I looked at my fiance, and I'm like, and she's like, don't open this can of worms. So I let it go. And fast forward 15 years. he comes and shares with us that his brother's got cancer and he's got 6 months to live. And I said, you need to go visit your brother and reconcile. And he said, I'm not going to go see that son of a bitch. You know, if he wants to, he can come and call me. And he gave me that whole song and dance. And I said, I'm not going to stop pushing you on this because I'm in this business of regret. I'm in the funeral business. I've seen hundreds of stories of coulda, shoulda, wouldas. And I said, you need to go do this. You need to be the bigger man. I won't go into my whole speech. And I said, I'm not going to let this go. And next time I saw him, I asked him, no. Third time I saw him, I asked him, he said, no. Fourth time I saw him, he said, I went and visited my brother. And I went, wow, you know, tell me about it. And you all know how the story ends. He visited him 3 more times. Mansfield's an hour away. I mean, it's not. And then he died. And he has thanked me many, many times for pushing him to go do that. But it was his courage. I mean, he had to be the bigger man, and he did it.
Thank you, Mike. Good story. Thank you. Somebody else. Courage in the world. Courageous love. Over here. Judy.
Sorry. I think of World Central Kitchen and people like them who go into harm's way to help people, particularly World Central Kitchen in Gaza, where they lost workers, but yet they went back as they were able. And that's a very, to put your life at risk for people who you don't necessarily know is huge.
Thank you, Judy. That is a great story. Julie and I had a friend in San Diego who was one of the Doctors Without Borders kind of people. Same kind of thing. He was an orthopedic surgeon, but he would go in and do whatever needed to be done. I'm talking about Paul Randall's, Julie. Somebody else. Courageous love at work in the world. All right. Well, let's close with this. Put the next slide up. Can we have this be our prayer for the night? Would you pray with me? Let's pray together. God of compassion, teach us the courage to love deeply. When the pain of the world pierces our hearts, help us remain present rather than turn away. Shape our lives through the love revealed at the cross so that we may become people of mercy, hope, and peace. Amen. Good night.